It's funny how words can change meanings in the course of even our lifetimes. The word goat. For example, years ago, if you were called an old goat, that meant you were a cranky, old, cantankerous man. Nobody liked you, you old goat. But now what does the word goat mean? Greatest of all time. So let's find out if you agree on some of the greatest of all times. Let's start with basketball. Who is the greatest of all time in basketball? I heard a lot of answers, but I checked it out, and there were two possible answers: Michael Jordan, LeBron James. You might even think someone else. How about the GOAT of baseball, the greatest baseball player of all time? According to polls I checked, Babe Ruth. And now the greatest NFL football player of all time? Tom Brady. Again, there may be others. But anyway, that's rather subjective, but it's an honor to be called the greatest of all time in your sport. That's wonderful when your fans, people who love you, call you a GOAT, the greatest of all time. Except when you call that yourself. And that's what happened to Jimmy and Johnny Zebedee in today's gospel. They thought they were the greatest of all time. They wanted to make sure Jesus recognized them as such. They go up to Jesus and said, Jesus, when you get into your kingdom, we want to sit at your right hand and your left. Now, if this was the U.S. government, they'd say, we want to be your vice president and secretary of state. Number 1 and 2 in the government. Now, first of all, the context in which this was given. Just before this conversation between James and John and Jesus, Jesus said, I'm going to Jerusalem, and there I'm going to die. I mean, he just predicted his death, and they're already grabbing power. I mean, it's like someone's on their deathbed, and you say, oh, by the way, can I have your car? Can I have the house? I mean, come on. How rude is that? So they were totally insensitive to Jesus' upcoming suffering that we heard Isaiah prophesy in the first reading. They just wanted to make sure they got in the top spots. I'm sure this is one of the many times that Jesus just kind of shook his head and said, you don't get it, do you? Well, the other 10 apostles were really upset, so they became indignant. Maybe because they wished they had beat James and John to Jesus and asked for themselves to get the highest spots in heaven. And finally, Jesus realized in the time he'd been with them, they hadn't learned their lessons at all. They were still thinking about power, authority, lording it over others, just like their Gentile rulers, Pilate and Herod and the Roman emperor, lording it over others, making sure everyone knew, I'm the boss, you're not. So Jesus tried to set them straight. He said, in my kingdom, to be great means you must be a servant. You must be a servant. And that's what's so very important for all of us. We call ourselves Christians, meaning Jesus Christ is our leader. And how do we follow Jesus? We try to imitate what Jesus did. We try to imitate that. And Jesus was a man of service. He didn't care whether you were slave or free, Jew or Gentile, old or young. He was there for everyone who needed him. He cured those who were blind and deaf and mute and crippled and filled with leprosy, even raised from the dead. And he says, now, as I have done, so you'd go and do the same. He made that very clear at the Last Supper when he knelt down on his hands and feet, as it were, and washed the feet of his apostles there. When he finished doing that kind of messy, smelly job, he said, do you see what I've done? Now you go and do the same. Go wash others' feet. He didn't mean that literally, although at times we have to do that literally. Certainly parents taking care of little children and infants bathe them all the time. And sometimes we have to do that for our aging parents when they can't take care of themselves. That's true service. You're doing the right thing. But Jesus spent his life serving others, and he asked us to go and do the same. Those of us who are in positions of authority like priests and pastors and bishops and cardinals and so on, the best way to describe what we should be like is called servant leadership. We are leaders, but we lead you in service. We show you how to service by the way we serve others and how very important that is. It's interesting in the 25th chapter of Matthew's Gospel when Jesus talks about the last judgment and how we'll be judged. He says the sheep will be on the right, and they're the good ones. Because when someone was hungry or thirsty or naked or homeless, Jesus said, you took care of me. And it's interesting that those left he called goats. Now, he didn't know that 2,000 years later in the English language, GOAT would be an acronym for greatest of all time. But maybe those who think they're goats, who think they're so special, they don't have to serve anyone. It's just all about getting served and having people recognize me. Maybe they should be on the left side, the side that's punished. So the challenge today is, how are you going to serve? Coming to Mass is not serving. What you do after Mass should be serving. Although during Mass you can serve. Yes, you can serve as one of our ministers of the liturgy, a reader, a Eucharistic minister, a server, whatever. But you can bring food. Every Sunday we have those bins up here. And we hope they are filled at the end of each Mass. So we have to empty them 5 times at the end of the weekend. So I've told you so many times, when you get ready to leave your house, as you pick up your car keys, I think very few of you walk to church. Go back to your pantry, go back to your kitchen, go back to your cupboards, and pull out something that you can do without and bring it here and feed the hungry. More and more people are in our streets hungry, wishing they had food to eat. You can serve them. Maybe not serve them face to face, but this food every Monday goes to a section of town called Casa de Luz. It's in what they call the Naked City, part of the city near the stratosphere, unfortunately, that has just a lot of drug dealers and other very unsavory characters wandering around, and a lot of homeless people. That's where your food goes. Will you remember next Sunday to bring food and fill these bins? We are entering on the holiday season. It's my favorite time of the year. I love Thanksgiving. I love Christmas. I love all the holidays because I know I'm going to have a great Thanksgiving with my family. I know I'll have a wonderful Christmas. A lot of people don't look forward to the holidays because they're not sure whether they'll have a Thanksgiving dinner or their children will have presents. But we always invite you to serve them. In fact, at the end of Mass, we'll say we are starting now our Thanksgiving food drive. I hope you answer it generously. So do you want to be a goat? Do you want to be the greatest of all time? Don't lord it over others. Don't brag about how important you are, how much money you have, or what kind of place you live in. To be a goat, in Jesus' term, is to serve others. And if we talk about the greatest of all time, Jesus Christ wins hands down. The greatest of all time, Jesus Christ. I have come to serve others. Will you go and do the same?